A view of America as many would like it to be, a New York City streetscape. Multi-ethnic, multi-racial, harmonious. And in many ways, it is an accurate reflection of who and what we are. But in 1998, it is not the America that many, thousands, experience in their daily lives. Good evening. The headlines contain harsh reminders that hate, sometimes brutal, still diminishes and threatens us as a nation. Wyoming, a 21-year-old gay college student is fatally beaten, left dangling from a fence post. Texas, a 49-year-old black man disabled, is kicked unconscious, chained, and dragged to his death. The number of organized hate groups in this country is up 20% in just 1 year. The internet now has more than 150 sites that promote racial hatred and provide a new tool to recruit young people. We begin tonight with Troy Roberts, and with a determined woman and her daughter whose lives are being torn by hate. They're barely 50 miles from the city of brotherly love, but you barely know it.
I'm going out there today.
Hey, Barbara.
We have a 9-year-old kid out here being racially harassed.
Bonnie Johari says she fights hate for a living.
The neighbors are like really giving this kid a hard way to go.
Do you lock this? You should.
And business is good these days.
Berks County has the most hate groups in the state of Pennsylvania.
Does your back door lock securely?
The amount of hate groups that are here in Berks County has tripled in the last 8 to 10 years.
I'd get anything away from the house that's flammable.
Bonnie works for the government. She's a fair housing advocate battling discrimination in Reading, Pennsylvania. Today, she's helping Barbara Kennan file a complaint.
I'm going to try to do harassment with the ethnic intimidation.
Mrs. Kennan says her family's being harassed by their white neighbors.
If you hate me, okay, but why take it out on my child? My child didn't ask to be born. He didn't ask to be black, you know, so why are you harassing him?
I need to explain to you that once we do this, you may be looking at some more retaliation. Do you know that?
I know.
Just 2 days after Bonnie filed a report on Mrs. Kennan's behalf, a fire gutted her son's bedroom.
I just wanted to live in my home with peace.
The fire department says it was arson. No one has yet been charged.
Come here, give me a big hug.
Oh, I'm so nervous, I'm scared.
I know.
I know.
I know. We're going to help you, okay?
I know.
When I first started this job, it's like, oh, well, you know, we have a couple of housing problems. I had no idea how bad it was and how violent some of the stuff is. Human Relations may help you.
Because of her work, Bonnie now believes the violence is about to come down on her. She's being threatened.
Have a good day. I love you too.
And so is her 16-year-old daughter, Danny.
My daughter, who's biracial, has a terrible time in her school.
Danny's father is black.
When I look in the mirror, I don't see ethnic. When I look in the mirror, I don't see anything. I just see me. But the older I got, the more I've come to realize that when people look at me, they don't just see me, they see a color. The teacher called me a nigger to my face.
A teacher?
A teacher. And to me, this isn't new. To me, this just isn't new.
Still, Danny doesn't let any of that get in her way.
I play volleyball, and I also run track and indoor track, and I'm also really involved in student council.
Everything's just great.
Uh-huh.
But Danny's mom sees life in Reading very differently.
You don't feel safe anymore.
No, I don't.
She wouldn't let Danny talk to us unless she wore sunglasses as a partial disguise.
I guess I thought I could keep her separated from this.
But now Bonnie is beginning to wonder if the only answer is to get out of town.
I want my daughter to have some peace and quiet.
Danny's horrified at the prospect of giving up the only place she's ever known.
My friends that I've had my entire life are here. I'm very involved in school.
I'm sorry, but I just want to get on with my life. And this is just kind of messing things up a lot.
Bonnie's troubles began almost a year ago.
Greetings, my Aryan brothers and sisters.
After a white supremacy group from Philadelphia viciously attacked her on the internet.
Basically saying that I'm a race traitor and I need to be hung.
They posted a picture of Bonnie's office being blown up over and over again.
It just exploded from there.
Exploded. What happened?
Phone calls here at work, phone calls at home, threatening calls, hang-up calls, flyers in my car at my house, race traitor beware, and it showed like this Klansman with a rope and in a hood and the whole works. It's just been a constant procession of craziness.
I don't take these people seriously. I really don't. Maybe I should.
But this is what Bonnie sees when she looks out of her office window. Roy Frankhauser, head of the local Ku Klux Klan.
Sometimes he stays for an hour, sometimes he stays for 3 hours.
Roy?
Probably because he knows it annoys me.
Can I ask you why you sit here almost every day outside of Bonnie's office?
Bonnie who? Oh. I mean, I'd like to know who you're talking about.
Good, so we're both recording. I'm interested in learning why you insist on sitting outside her office.
I don't sit outside of her office. I sit across from the courthouse and the county commissioner's office, which I've just been at a meeting.
Thank you for dialing us again at White Forum.
And across from a television station where I do a television show.
This is something that's been on the internet, and we've had all sorts of FBI agents descended upon us because of Bonnie Johari.
Is he a threat to you?
I believe that he is. I'm actually starting to believe now more that he is than I ever did. And the reason that I now believe that is because he's just far too interested in everything that I do.
This is not someone to be taken as a joke at all.
Brian Levin, Bonnie's attorney, is an expert on hate crimes.
He might look like just an older middle-aged guy who's kind of quirky, but this is a man with an extensive criminal record.
You've been in a lot of trouble in your day, huh?
Yes, I guess I have. So is a lot of other people in this country.
In and out of prison?
All for good causes. I've been arrested over 142 times.
142 times.
That's right.
Roy Frankhauser's rap sheet includes convictions for stealing explosives and selling them to a Klan member, and illegal firearms possession. He also once stabbed a fellow Klansman, but was acquitted on grounds of self-defense. He's currently on parole.
Bonnie is afraid of you.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Bonnie is afraid of what you're capable of.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I personally don't like anybody to be afraid of me.
I only fear those I respect, and I have no respect for these people.
I don't give them enough credit to actually follow through, because I think ignorant people are weak people.
She said to me, Mom, why do you always have to try to do what's right? It doesn't pay. I didn't think about that. I did have to think about it. And I said, it pays for me because I'm the one that has to go to bed at night.
I think that if we leave them alone, then they'll leave us alone.
But they're not leaving you alone.
You're not really leaving them alone either.
What do you mean?
And which is why all this stuff is happening really bad now, because her job, the pressure's on. She's putting the pressure on, and they're reacting.
The crank phone calls, the threatening messages, and nearly daily visits from Roy Frankhauser continued for months. But for her daughter's sake, Bonnie was resolved to stay in Reading. All that changed, though, after Danny got a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Some woman came on and said that she's seen my mother's bedroom and hung up. So that bugged me, because no one had my phone line except my close friends.
The fact that these individuals became aware of her and her name and her phone number told me she is not safe here.
Who do you think is behind all that, Roy?
I don't know. I'm very cautious about putting blame on anyone.
I'm not putting blame, I'm asking you. Who do you think is behind all of this?
A jealous lover? I don't know.
Who did you turn to for help?
The FBI, U.S. Attorney's Office, state police, local police.
The local authorities told Bonnie that Frankhauser is within his First Amendment rights. The only advice from the federal authorities is to leave town. Reluctantly, her attorney Brian Levin agrees.
You know what? You've been enough of a martyr. Let's get you the hell out of here. Okay?
Okay. I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
And Mary Frankhauser still sits on my bench.
I think that the government and the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the police are just as bad as any one of those KKK members. Because before we pick up and have to move our entire lives across the country, there should be a policeman standing at that door. There should be a cop that if he needs to, hold my hand as I walk to school and stands outside her office. They're not doing their job.
Next,
Good morning. My name is Bonnie. I'm interested in looking at some apartments today.
will any place
Think you'll like it out here?
ever be safe for Bonnie and Danny?
Did you tell Roy where I'm going? Why? By what, 3?
For Bonnie Johari, the attacks on the internet,
It's ridiculous. And I don't think that I should to leave.
the death threats,
These people want to hurt us.
the daily visits from Roy Frankhauser of the KKK have all become too much.
You know, I've not had about enough of that man. All this aggravation was to get me to leave. Okay, I'm leaving, so...
After 30 years, she's decided to leave Reading, Pennsylvania. And her daughter Danny is upset.
I'm pretty angry right now because our lives are getting so turned upside down.
Would you have preferred that your mom keep quiet?
No. I think it's great that somebody's trying to do something that's right. As her daughter, as a 16-year-old girl who wants to live her life like a 16-year-old girl, yes.
She thinks I have this need to save the world, and because of the need that I have to save the world, I got her into this mess. Which is true, I did.
Is that true?
Yeah. I feel like her job came before us. I feel like the rest of the world, in Berks County, and all the people that were ever treated unjustly came before us, family.
Why are you crying?
Even though she doesn't believe it, she's the most important thing in my life. And my #1 job is being a mom and protecting her. And I feel like I didn't do a real good job at that.
Mom, I'm already overpacking.
To keep the harassment from starting again in her new home, Bonnie kept her destination a secret.
Nobody except like Valentine or that knucklehead Tina get it.
At least,
Bye.
so she thought.
We talked to Roy Frankhauser. Roy Frankhauser knows where you're moving.
This is another part of the problem. Folks find out everything I do almost as soon as I know it.
Bonnie is pretty sure she knows who did it.
Mr.
A
Cramsey,
reporter for the Reading Eagle named Kevin Cramsey.
did you tell Roy where I'm going? Why? You know, Kevin, this is not funny. This is why I'm going, to get away from these people. I called him and asked him if he did it, and he said that he did it.
Why? Why would he share that information with the local Klansman?
I don't know. I don't know.
Do you have an idea where she's going, Roy?
Well, according to people that she's talked to them from the sheriff's office and other places, and what she said on television to Luann Kahn, she's moving out west somewhere.
You know exactly where she's moving.
I do? Oh, that's interesting.
You told my producer that you know exactly where she's moving to. How would you learn that information?
Sitting on a bench.
Excuse me. You know what Kevin's office?
We tried to get a statement from Cramsey and his newspaper, but
I would appreciate your being downstairs.
both have declined to comment.
So what do you do now?
I don't know. Why would he even find the need to contact Roy Frankhauser and tell him that? I don't know. I have a headache.
Strangely, most of the local media are ignoring Bonnie's story. In fact, from the onset of her troubles, only one news outlet has covered it.
Now, Reading police say they have been informed of the situation.
Reporter Chris Dixon.
I just think there's resistance to getting in on this topic. I think it's something people don't like to hear. And as to whether or not those are the reasons why print or radio or other television media haven't covered it, I can't be sure, but it makes my life a little easier.
You know what's kind of confusing to me is that you're so hooked into the system. Yet it was very difficult for you to find help here.
For a long time, you know, a lot of people warn me, you know, you better stop it because people are getting mad at you. I'm like, God, they have to get mad because that make me stop? But I think in the back of my mind, which was obviously foolhardy with hindsight, I thought, well, if I get into trouble, I won't worry because they're gonna come and help me. That's what I thought. Okay, kid, what else are we forgetting? Your ID?
I got all of it taken care of yesterday.
Has it really sunk in yet that you have to leave?
No. It's where I grew up. My best friends are here. I have to pick up and leave. I have to pick up and leave everything that's important to me.
Danny is inconsolable, but Bonnie is adamant.
We have to think about things like safety.
She's found a new job far from Reading.
House hunting's a long, tedious job.
48 Hours agreed not to say where, and the only thing left is finding a place to live.
Good morning. My name is Bonnie. I'm relocating here from...
I'm leaving good friends that have taken place of family I no longer have. She's losing everything she's ever known.
I think you'll like it out here.
The whole reason she set out to do this was to not let these people get away with what they were
This
doing.
one has a phone jack.
And I feel like it was all in vain.
Now, if you would fill out your address.
They don't want to hear her mouth anymore, and they don't want to see her face anymore. And now they're getting exactly what they wanted. So they won this battle. The way I look at it, they won this battle.
Not exactly.
You're going to swear out a complaint against Frank Hauser, presumably for stalking
and harassment.
Later, in our 48 Hours, Bonnie Johari gets a measure of revenge.
Just ahead, meet Jeff Berry.
We do not kill people. We do not threaten people of different races or different beliefs.
He says his clan is different.
We help people in court cases. We donate food, clothing.
Does that make them even more dangerous?
Give your soul to God because your ass is mine.
If you love the niggers so much, go back to Africa.
We're not terrorists. I'll personally kick your ass. We are separatist Christians. White power! White power!
Anyone who thinks the Ku Klux Klan is a thing of the past.
The people portray us to be dark. Out of the darkness will come the light.
Should think again.
For God! For God! For our children! For our children! God bless the KKK! God bless the KKK!
Meet Jeff Berry.
I'm the Imperial Wizard of the American Knights of the Ku Klux Klan.
He's the man some call the new face of hate in America.
I'm proud of being white. And if that makes us a racist, then I guess I'm damn proud of being a racist.
Berry grew up in an integrated neighborhood of Chicago.
The blacks went out there, they fought for their rights.
And he grew up angry.
They got more than their rights. You know, the white man does not have any rights anymore.
Now a family man, Berry owns a tow truck business, but his life is the Klan.
American Knights, this is the national office here.
Operating in the open from his home in eastern Indiana, Berry could be the most visible and active Klan leader since David Duke. In just the last 2 years, from almost nothing, the American Knights have held rallies in at least 7 states and claim a presence in 38 states. Some are the last places you'd expect to find the Klan.
Where's that first rally at? It's in Mercer, PA.
Mercer, Pennsylvania, cross-state from where Bonnie Johari is being harassed by a different faction of the Klan. Dawn, and Berry's group is launching an offensive into the northeastern Rust Belt, a place prosperity abandoned.
They have a right to accept us or a right not to accept it. It's their choice. We're going to be there whether they like it or not.
Floyd Cochran will also attend the Klan rallies.
Let's face it, the Ku Klux Klan is a criminal gang.
But he'll be there to meet the Klan head-on.
We shouldn't resort to violence.
Cochran is a self-appointed Klan watchdog.
I don't put up with niggers in my neighborhood.
And he says in his state, the number of hate groups is 5 times greater than it was a decade ago.
Here in Pennsylvania, you have Philadelphia at one end, and you have Pittsburgh at the other end, and you have Alabama in between.
Go to your right.
Cochran understands why Berry's American Knights are growing.
You can say he's a buffoon and an idiot, but he is talking to people that no one else talks to.
Your families don't even stay at home with you. That's what's wrong.
And what Berry is talking about is not just race, it's the minimum wage.
When I was 18 years old, I was making 19 bucks an hour. Now you're lucky to make $8 an hour.
It's affirmative action.
But we want our damn equal rights.
It's crime.
For all you gangbangers out there, you need to get a better life. Killing one another is not it. Get off the streets. Get off of welfare.
And some people, especially poor white people, are listening.
Well, the Ku Klux Klan is here to stand up for the white man. We will die for the white man. I am proud of being white. White power!
What is the difference between you and what other people would consider the old Klan?
We do not kill people. We do not hassle people.
Why don't you get educated, you big baboon?
We do not threaten people of different races or different beliefs.
Give your soul to God because your ass is mine.
We want equal rights for whites.
No Klan! No Klan!
But Floyd Cochran has seen this technique before.
And it's time that we start actively participating in community-sponsored events.
He was one of the people who invented it. That's right. The man now dedicated to fighting hate was once lead spokesman and spin doctor for the white supremacist group Aryan Nations.
I went in and tried to convince people they had nothing to fear from me, therefore making my racism palatable.
Hate's not all that bad.
Right.
When Cochran was in the movement, he found that hate came easily.
The hatred was taught in the name of God. I mean, I had a religious justification to look at another human being and say, I don't hate that person because I do. I hate that person because God wants me to. Part of it was I also got a uniform. Part of it was I got to be somebody.
Which he saw as a leap from being a nobody.
In 1990, I milked cows for a living. In 1991, I'm in Newsweek. I'm doing interviews, and people are calling me up, asking me my opinion.
But all that began to change when an Aryan Nations leader told Cochran his 4-year-old son would have to die.
And I told him my youngest son was getting ready to have another operation on his palate.
His child had been born with a cleft palate and under Aryan ideology would have to be euthanized.
I mean, this is my son. And over a course of 3 months, from April until July, when I left in 1992, it kept working on me internally. The people that I had known as friends, I started seeing faults. You know? And they're out to recruit you.
So now, Floyd Cochran is on a personal crusade.
There's no reason to have a Klan in the 1990s. I mean, if you don't like someone, stay the hell away from them, right?
To remind people, Jeff Berry's packaging may be new.
You people need to wake up, change your society.
But what his group is selling is old.
Because the Klan is getting bigger. Aren't you glad you're not a nigger? White power!
My definition of a nigger, no matter what color you are, is a dirty, low-down person that takes and takes from society and don't give anything back.
A new definition?
No, niggers come in all colors.
We've got to get off our ass and take back our streets from these filthy apes.
Filthy apes? That's not intended to mean black people?
No. If I wanted to intend black people, I would say black people.
Why don't these niggers go back to Africa?
Out in the audience, though, Brian Sanders knows exactly what Jeff Berry means.
My great-grandfather was killed by the Klan. I came here to let the Klan know that black people are no longer afraid of them.
If you don't intend to engender hate, why do you use such harsh rhetoric? Why do you use hateful symbols?
What is a hateful symbol?
The cross, in flames, the use of the word Ku Klux Klan. All of that has a long legacy, and you know it, of blacks dying, blacks being harassed, blacks being tarred and feathered.
That's the blacks' opinion, okay? You guys ready?
Even Berry's critics acknowledge he is one of the most effective Klan recruiters ever. Passing out Klan literature on the street.
This town is so friendly, I think we ought to move here. Well, we have chat rooms on it. We have 27 chat rooms.
The American Knights, now creatures of the 90s, even have their own website.
Or they can email us. Their neighbor or somebody they work with won't see them doing it.
We will fight for our Constitution. The Klan don't run.
You know, for 38, 40 guys to stand on some courthouse steps with this harangue, on one level, don't you have to ask, who cares?
Right.
So what?
Right. But then I turn around and look at 200 people who came out to listen to him harangue.
You chicken bastards!
Jeff Berry says his rhetoric is not a call to violence. The question is someone out there hearing one?
Coming up,
it was meant to be for me to be there.
Brian Sanders has a message for the Klan, and it's personal. And then later, they were run out of town by hate. Can Bonnie and Danny even the score?
When 48 Hours first met Brian Sanders, a Pennsylvania prison guard,
Klan is getting bigger. Aren't you glad you're not a nigger?
we wondered why he was drawn to the Klan rally in Mercer.
I see niggers standing on the courthouse steps selling crack cocaine. White power!
Wondered why he would want to hear the hatred of Jeff Berry and his followers.
They're still spouting the same old thing they've been spouting for the last 30, 40 years.
I have a daughter that's 21 and a son that's 23, and you know what? They hate niggers too!
Brian Sanders had come to the courthouse steps out of a very personal sense of history.
My great-grandfather was killed by the Klan in Alabama some time ago. He was a county sheriff. He took a Klansman to court, brought him outside the court. They killed him on the courthouse steps.
For Brian Sanders, the history of the Klan and its terror is not just for books. It's a real part of his family's story.
What had you heard about Henry Sanders over the years in your generation?
Well, I remember speaking to my one aunt who's deceased now, Air Lee Anderson, and she had told me that it was definitely the Klan that killed him.
Who did kill Henry Sanders? We went looking for an answer. Looking for the record from 73 years ago.
1925.
Looking for what just did happen in Marion, Alabama.
Seems that we might have located something.
Late in the afternoon on January 7th, 1925.
Negro killed.
The day when Henry Sanders was shot and killed.
Henry Sanders, colored deputy sheriff, was shot and killed on the street across from Rankin Motor Company last Wednesday afternoon about 6 o'clock.
Black people didn't have no rights in the 20s.
County Commissioner Albert Turner.
You have to really understand what it was like in the 20th year for blacks.
It was a decade that saw at least 281 African Americans lynched.
Black people wasn't even considered hardly to be citizens or people.
In 1925, if I had been a black man living there at that time, I would have been scared to death.
Dr. W. Stewart Harris is the acknowledged authority on the history of Perry County, Alabama. Marion is the county seat.
A man could be killed in those days, as you notice, Negro killed or Negro shot, and no one cared.
He has closely studied the history of the Klan, including his family history from Mississippi.
My own great-great-grandfather became the local Klan leader in that period of time.
Would you say this was at or near the height of the Klan?
Oh, yes.
Historical fact that they were night riders who burned people's homes?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
What we would call unspeakable crimes.
Yes.
These are historical
castrations, beatings of all kinds, flogging.
And I've been a Klansman since 1915, and I have no apology to offer for it.
In 1925, the year Henry Sanders was killed, the Klan claimed more than 2 million members. 40,000 supporters marched on Washington. In 1965, 40 years later, during the struggle for civil rights, the Klan re-emerged.
I don't believe in segregation, I believe in slavery.
The letters KKK were carved with a penknife on the chest and stomach of this man in Houston, Texas, after he had been hanged by his knees from an oak tree and flogged with a chain.
Why don't these niggers go back to Africa?
Now, in the 90s, Brian Sanders, whose family fled the Deep South after the murder of Henry Sanders, is hearing echoes of the past and hearing a call to stand up for his great-grandfather.
Did you think about that before you went there?
Oh, definitely. I figured that would be the place to be. It was meant to be for me to be there, just like it was meant for my great-grandfather to be on the courthouse steps.
As for whether or not the man who shot and killed Henry Sanders was a Klansman,
Here we have John D. Edwards.
we simply don't know.
I met the gentleman who killed him, if I may call him a gentleman. I met him about 30 years ago on one occasion. He had a reputation of being a very hard man, on anyone, but particularly on the blacks. This man may have been a member of the Klan now. I do not know, because there are no records. You know, all the records have been destroyed.
In Marion, Alabama, the death of Henry Sanders and the possible involvement of the Klan has all but been forgotten. But not in Mercer, Pennsylvania. Not for Brian Sanders. He is determined that history will not repeat itself. Not in his time. Not in his town.
I came here to let the Klan know that black people are no longer afraid of them. We're not afraid of them, that's the bottom line, not at all.
Coming up.
What do you think really happened to your son?
Well, I know my son was murdered.
They knew what he believed, and they killed him for it.
In memory of a son.
He was my baby boy.
Federal law defines hate crimes as those committed for reasons of race, color, religion, or national origin. The president, after the brutal murder of Matthew Shepard in Wyoming, is now urging Congress to expand the list to also include crimes motivated by sexual orientation, as well as gender and disability. Who are the haters among us? We may all be prone to making certain assumptions, stereotypes, if you will, about those who hate, but Wyatt Andrews has a surprising story of one hate crime whose origins may shock you. It may also go a long way towards shattering your own stereotypes about the haters among us.
On the 4th of July, a dead body is discovered in the desert just outside of Las Vegas.
We arrived, the victim's vehicle was parked here on the road.
Metro Homicide Police had seen this kind of execution before.
They put a shotgun into his ribs, directly against his body.
But the look of this victim was something new.
He had a close-shaved head and numerous piercings.
Homicide Detective Dwayne Morgan.
He had some nose rings, kind of like what the biker wallet chain, and the military-type boots on.
You're thinking, if I might, neo-Nazi skinhead.
Exactly.
White racist skinhead.
Exactly.
At that moment, Morgan saw his victim as part of this. Neo-Nazi skinheads who use rebellious looks. And loud music to recruit disaffected kids over to the cause of racial hatred, and sometimes to violence. But that's why, when Morgan then looked into the back seat of the victim's car, he was confused.
When we found the jacket in his vehicle, which had apparent patches on it, said anti-racist, I think we all were kind of at a loss.
But are you thinking at this point, wait a minute, there are anti-racist skinheads?
Exactly.
It turns out the victim is 20-year-old Daniel Schursty, an airman at nearby Nellis Air Force Base and an anti-racist skinhead. Police also learned that another anti-racist skinhead was with Schursty that night. So now they begin searching for a possible second victim. And here's where the cops who'd seen everything faced their biggest surprise.
Because we're thinking skinhead, we never even thought that he was black.
Schursty's friend was 24-year-old Lynn Newborn, an anti-racist skinhead and an African-American.
Metro homicide detectives are just now slowly carrying the body of the second victim out from the desert.
2 days later, Newborn's body is found 150 yards from where Schursty was slain. Police quickly learned that Lynn Newborn, nicknamed Spit,
of course, some idol kills are Spitler, kill clown,
was a respected leader in the skinhead culture.
Just so many people just bleed their face totally into television.
Hundreds turned out for Spit's funeral.
We'll always remember your kind words, your warm smile, and your gentle ways.
We've talked to several of his friends, and the first thing they say about him is, this is a charismatic man.
Yes, yes.
And you didn't know that?
I didn't know that. No, he was my son, Lynn. He was my baby boy.
Spit's father, Lionel Newborn.
I was totally ignorant to how involved Lynn was in the community, in the anti-racist movement, how many people he had come into contact with.
From everyone we talked to, he just had the personality of a Dalai Lama as far as they were concerned. I mean, they all just gyrated around him.
I don't look up to many people, but I did look up to Spit.
19-year-old John Toddy was one of Spitz's closest friends.
He was one of Las Vegas's top organizers against racism who was actually making a difference.
Why do you think he became a skinhead?
He loved the culture. I mean, he really understood the culture.
The truth is, beans are a mother's child.
A culture, Toddy says, that's about working-class rage, not race.
When skinhead culture started out in the late 60s, it wasn't about racism. It was about a bunch of kids listening to ska and reggae music with shaved heads. And it kind of grew into a culture more than just, you know, a fashion.
No Nazis, no KKK, no fascists, USA.
In fact, anti-racist skinheads say the Nazi skinheads may look the same, but have no place in the movement.
What do you think really happened to your son?
Well, I know my son was murdered. He was murdered.
By neo-Nazis?
I believe so.
Didn't want this black man in their face?
That's right.
We think he was specifically targeted.
This was no random thing?
No.
Homicide Lieutenant Wayne Peterson agrees.
I think him being a black man, a leader in this anti-racist group, an opposing group, that he was a very visual target for anyone with those Nazi racist skinhead beliefs.
He died for his convictions. And that meant something to me.
Which is why Spit Newborn's murder has been officially classified a hate crime.
They knew who he was, they knew what he believed, they knew what he was doing, and they killed him for it.
Beat the bonehead, smash the Klan. We want justice for Spit Dead.
At the end of it all, did you come away with an understanding that this guy fought the good fight?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I'm only sorry that he had to.
10 weeks after the bodies were found, 26-year-old Jonathan Butler, who police say is a Nazi skinhead, was charged with the murders of Dan Schursty and Lynn Newborn.
In a moment,
You're going to swear out a complaint against Frank Hauser, presumably for stalking
And harassment.
Bonnie and Danny hoping to get even
She decided that we need to leave tonight.
and stay safe.
Heading Pennsylvania by fear.
I know you're probably going to like run back here with a friend or something to pick something up, but you can't come by yourself.
But Bonnie, who's been fighting hate groups for the last 4 years, is not retreating without firing a few parting shots.
You're going to swear out a complaint against Frank Hauser, presumably for stalking
And harassment.
2 weeks ago, she filed charges against Roy Frankhauser of the KKK for stalking and harassment.
The best case scenario is that he's taken into custody and he can't do any harm.
If he's charged and found guilty, Frankhauser will have violated his parole and be sent back to prison.
The worst case scenario is that he or someone that he tells will come after me or my daughter.
Greetings, my Aryan brothers. And remember the website that attacked Bonnie, calling her a race traitor and showing her office exploding? This week, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania filed civil charges against the organization that published it for making terroristic threats and harassment.
She decided that we need to leave tonight.
Because she fears retaliation, Bonnie decided to leave her old apartment.
She's my mom and I'll stand by her. Whether I agree with that or what's going on doesn't really matter.
Okie dokie.
She has good intentions. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out the way it should have.
Watch out, the lights.
Tonight, she and Danny are living in an undisclosed location until their final move early in November.
There may be a whole lot at stake in Bonnie Johara's case. It shapes up as a test of the constitutional limits of free speech and a test of the government's ability to protect the targets of hate. The First Amendment may be a sanctuary to hateful speech, but that doesn't make the words any less offensive to the rest of us. Perhaps the best lesson comes from Floyd Cochran. He's the white supremacist we met who now speaks out against hate. He says he was taught how to hate, which holds out the hope that we can also be taught and will teach how not to. That's 48 hours for today.